Previously on the show, Kai obtained the magic sealed by Joe through a dagger and eventually escaped the prison world. Damon and Elena used the Ascendant, with Liv's help, to successfully enter the prison world in search of Bonnie. However, when Bonnie returned, Liv and Tyler hid inside an anti-magic barrier, causing the spell to fail, and Damon and Elena returned to the real world without saving Bonnie. Kai caught Joe and attempted to absorb her magic, but Damon and Alaric arrived just in time to save her. In the process, Kai absorbed the power of the anti-magic barrier, breaking the spell around Mystic Falls. Kai captured Elena to practice his new magic, and once again, Damon and Joe came to the rescue. The story picks up where it left off. Since Sheriff Forbes was diagnosed with terminal cancer, Caroline has been determined to use her vampire blood to heal her mother. However, Damon doesn't agree with her. He's lived for 170 years and has never heard of vampire blood curing cancer. Cancer cells can proliferate and spread infinitely, and no one knows what terrifying consequences might arise if combined with vampire blood. After bringing her mother home, Caroline decided to head to Duke University, where the top cancer experts are. Stefan offered to accompany Caroline and also visit a friend while they were there. When they arrived at Duke, Stefan stayed at the art gallery, while Caroline went straight to the medical school. The friend Stefan wanted to see was none other than the real Sarah, his great-great-niece, and the last living bloodline of the Salvatore family. Although Sarah didn't know Stefan, he had been secretly watching over her for more than a decade. Even though Damon had turned over a new leaf, Stefan still didn't want to reveal Sarah's existence to him.
Good stuff.
What Stefan didn't expect was that Enzo had followed them to Duke University. Stefan was on high alert, worried that Enzo would discover Sarah's true identity. Meanwhile, Carolyn found the cancer expert. Under her compulsion, the expert revealed his honest opinion. Sheriff Forbes was in the late stages of cancer, and there was no feasible treatment. Caroline was devastated. The expert also mentioned there was another patient in a similar condition, someone for whom no treatment had worked, and who was now just waiting to die. Caroline decided to experiment on this patient. She snuck into Colin's room and found that his condition was even worse than her mother's. After months of chemotherapy, there had been no improvement. Caroline bit her wrist and let her blood flow into Colin's mouth. Colin instinctively began to suck. Colin heard Caroline's soothing words, telling him that drinking her blood would make him better. At the university art exhibit, despite Sarah taking her adoptive parents' surname, Enzo still saw through her identity. He was curious why Stefan had kept this secret from Damon. If Damon knew that Zach's daughter was still alive, maybe he'd feel a little less guilty. Stefan had no choice but to come clean. He didn't want Sarah to be dragged into the world of the Salvatore brothers. This was the only way to ensure she lived a safe and happy life. Stefan spoke earnestly, and Enzo seemed moved. At that moment, Caroline called. Stefan lied, saying he was bidding on a painting. Caroline confessed that she was in the middle of an experiment and needed Stefan to come quickly. But with Enzo still lurking around Sarah, Stefan was caught in a dilemma.
You can keep that piece of art. Photography bores me. I withdraw my bid.
Once Enzo left, Stefan could finally go to Caroline. When he arrived at the hospital, Caroline proudly showed him the miracle she had created. Colin, who had been terminally ill, was suddenly full of life and energy. Stefan, however, remained troubled. This recovery seemed far too miraculous. If vampire blood could cure cancer, surely he would have heard about it in all his years. But Caroline was ecstatic, and she didn't bring him here to argue with her.
I need you to believe it will work. Or at the very least, just believe that I believe it will work.
Not wanting to crush Caroline's hopes, Stefan took one last look at the now vibrant Colin, thinking perhaps he was overthinking things. After leaving Duke University, Enzo returned to the photography exhibit. He compelled the curator to take all of Sarah's artwork. It turns out he never gave up on his revenge against Stefan. But a perfect revenge requires careful planning and patience. When Stefan and Caroline returned to town, Caroline told her mother about her experiment, how she had saved a terminal cancer patient with her blood. Sheriff Forbes couldn't believe it. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. The mother and daughter imagined their future lives and couldn't help but cry with joy.
You're supposed to be here for my college graduation. We're supposed to argue about flower arrangements for my wedding. I want that too, honey.
Caroline bit her wrist and let her blood drip into a teacup. Little did they know, that night, Colin, who had been full of life during the day, suddenly began coughing up blood. Caroline's blood hadn't cured him. Instead, it had sped up his death. Caroline had unknowingly handed her mother a poison.
Be with me.
Everything's gonna be okay.
This was a vampire with cancer, unable to die, yet living a fate worse than death. He might just be the most tragic vampire on screen. Vampire blood can heal any illness or injury, but it cannot cure cancer. In her desperation to save her mother, Caroline had experimented on Colin, a terminal brain cancer patient, but her blood had accelerated the cancer's spread. Before dawn, Colin showed up at Caroline's door, throwing her into a panic. She immediately called Stefan. Stefan speculated that Colin had completed the transition. This explained how, despite Caroline erasing Colin's memory, he was still able to find her. Colin's burns in the sunlight confirmed Stefan's theory.
He's a vampire. Which means after you fed him your blood.
He died.
Stefan rushed Colin to the hospital for tests, and they discovered that not only had the brain cancer not disappeared after his vampiric transformation, but it had spread throughout his brain. Cancer typically has 4 stages, but Colin's condition was now off the charts. Becoming a vampire might be a new beginning for others, but for a cancer patient, it was an eternal torment, worse than death. Only then did they realize that Caroline had also given her mother some of her blood. Sheriff Forbes was destined to follow in Colin's footsteps, which filled Caroline with overwhelming guilt. In the hospital room, Colin woke up and began to self-harm incessantly. The brain cancer made his life a living hell. Seeing Colin's miserable state only deepened Caroline's guilt.
You want to help me? Help me die.
Damon mercifully took out Colin's heart. Death was his release. Crushed by despair, Caroline spiraled into self-destruction. She accepted that she had killed her mother, and unable to face her, she fled. Stefan quietly stayed by Caroline's side, listening to her pain, and then he shared the story of his own mother. His mother had also died from illness, and now he regretted not being with her in her final moments. Meanwhile, Liv and Luke confronted their father, Joshua, hoping to abolish the twin merge tradition. Joshua revealed the secret of the Gemini Coven. Without a new twin merge to take over his leadership, the twin bloodline would cease to exist. The siblings had no choice but to opt for an alternative plan. They decided to give Jo more time to develop so she could merge with and defeat Kai. Joshua immediately shot down this plan. The twin merge wasn't just about magic, it also fused souls. Even if Jo wins, she will become the second Kai. The negotiations reached an impasse. Since Kai was captured, Jo has been using drugs to keep him asleep. However, Tyler, in a bid to save Liv, planned to release Kai. Luckily, Damon discovered his plan just in time and stopped him, but Tyler's reckless move gave Damon an idea on how to purify the vampire blood in Sheriff Forbes' system.
I could kiss you right now, you beautiful moron.
After hearing what Damon said, Tyler was completely dumbfounded. After Damon drugged Tyler and knocked him unconscious, Kai woke up as well. The magic Kai had absorbed earlier had drained away, and the only way for him to gain permanent power was through the twin merge. Damon wanted to strike a deal with Kai.
Discuss my fee.
Vampire blood, after all, is a product of magic, so Kai used siphoning to extract the magic from Sheriff Forbes' blood. In return, Damon promised to help Kai merge with Jo. If Alaric knew, he would definitely want to kill Damon. Jo didn't feel ready. She wasn't confident she could beat Kai. Damon privately told Jo that he was only pretending to agree with Kai's demands. Unexpectedly, Kai uses invisibility to break Damon's neck.
Magical neck snap.
Meanwhile, Joshua played the family card, deceiving Luke and Liv. Since Luke and Liv refused to merge, Joshua decided to perform the spell himself to force the merge. Just as the spell was about to take effect, Tyler came crashing in and knocked Joshua unconscious, stopping the twins from merging. After this incident, Luke made a difficult decision. He didn't want to consume his sister, but he also didn't want to see the Gemini Coven fall. As the stronger of the twins, he felt he had to step up. Meanwhile, Jo and Kai began the merge ceremony, but they were interrupted by Luke, who intended to take his sister's place and merge with Kai instead. Kai found this amusing, saying, "But we're not even twins." Luke argued that they shared the same bloodline. Facing Luke's provocation, Kai actually backed down. Unexpectedly, Luke forced Kai to decide to carry out the fusion ritual.
What's wrong? Are you afraid to play chicken with someone who might actually beat you?
The two brothers began the merge ceremony, and suddenly, fierce winds kicked up, and their eyes turned a cloudy gray. When the ceremony ended, both Luke and Kai collapsed. On the other side, Sheriff Forbes, after all the chaos, suffered cardiac arrest. When Caroline found out, she was devastated and wept bitterly. Meanwhile, inside Sheriff Forbes's dream, she was packing her bags, preparing for a journey. But before leaving, she saw her daughter standing silently by the window. Sheriff Forbes was so shocked that she woke up. Although it was a false alarm, Elena was still shaken, realizing that she and Damon had almost caused Sheriff Forbes' death. Damon caught up to Elena to comfort her, and they shared a passionate kiss, rekindling their romance. Sheriff Forbes knew her daughter all too well, and she kept reassuring Caroline, telling her, "This is not your fault, so don't blame yourself anymore." After sending Caroline away, Sheriff Forbes asked Stefan to stay. She wanted to entrust him with her final wish. After her passing, she hoped Stefan would take care of Caroline.
Move on with her life. Someone to just make her smile. Promise me that you will do that, Stefan.
Promise.
Hiding behind the door, Caroline overheard everything, and it intensified her guilt and heartbreak even more. Meanwhile, neither Luke nor Kai had woken up yet. The outcome of the life or death merge remained a mystery. Joe kept calling out for Luke. Damon arrived and, seeing that Joe was unharmed, let out a sigh of relief. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known how to face Alaric. Damon wanted to use his own blood to save Luke, but Joe told him it was useless.
Whoever wakes up is the winner, and whoever doesn't.
As they talked, Luke began to show signs of waking up. Liv had been unable to reach her brother by phone, and she was frantic with worry. At that moment, Joshua woke up, sensing something terrifying. He bluntly stated that Luke had lost and wanted to flee with Liv. Liv refused to believe it and insisted on staying, so Joshua fled alone. Luke, who was the first to wake up, had a vacant look in his eyes, and then he lost all life force. He died without finding peace. As Joe wept over Luke's body, a voice came from behind her. It was Kai.
You win some, you lose some. Except for me. I always win.
After merging with his brother Luke, Kai surprisingly developed a sense of compassion. The next morning, he approached Damon and asked him to deliver an apology letter to Liv. Damon and Elena both looked like they had seen a ghost. Could a demon actually feel guilt? It was obvious that Kai didn't want to acknowledge his own tears.
Water just oozing out of my eyeballs like I'm some alien creature excreting fluids.
You mean you cried?
Yes!
After all, it was the first time in his life he had ever experienced crying. Luke's soul had given Kai a sense of kindness. Realizing Kai's transformation, Damon and Elena agreed to deliver his letter to Liv, but on one condition. Kai had to help bring Bonnie back from the prison world. Although Kai had become the new leader of the Gemini Coven, with the Ascendant damaged, bringing Bonnie back seemed nearly impossible. Damon had no choice but to go with an alternative plan.
Well, can we use that hunk of junk to send a message at least? It is her birthday.
Meanwhile, Liv was devastated by Luke's death, and Tyler wanted to take her far away. But Liv refused to run and hide. She wanted to kill Kai to avenge Luke. However, since Kai was now the Coven leader, killing him would mean the death of the entire Gemini Coven. Liv's plan was basically suicide. Tyler tried desperately to stop her, but Liv cast a spell to knock him out. While Kai was repairing the Ascendant, Damon and Elena discussed how to guide Bonnie to save herself. Bonnie needed magic to get out, but how could she replenish her power? Damon and Elena thought of the stone containing Katsia's blood. It was buried in Silas's tomb. Their reasoning was acknowledged by Kai. At that moment, Jeremy arrived, eager to help. Kai then used the broken Ascendant to cast a spell and send them all into the prison world. but they found themselves like ghosts, unable to touch anything in this realm. Bonnie, meanwhile, was celebrating her birthday alone, watching her daily video logs, completely unaware that Jeremy and the others were silently watching with her. When Bonnie opened a bottle of wine, Damon's face grew serious. He explained that he and Bonnie had once made a pact. If the loneliness became unbearable, they would share the most expensive bottle of wine and end it all. Bonnie was already contemplating ending her life. Just when it was most critical, they were pulled back to the real world. Kai had suffered a backlash from his spell. The more people involved, the heavier the burden. But they had to get a message to Bonnie, to give her hope and a reason to keep going.
All while sending the three of you back over there? Sure, yeah. Hey, why don't I reanimate your dead parents for a tea party while I'm at it?
Faced with Kai's snarky remarks, they fell silent. Even if they entered the prison world, how would they be able to relay a message to Bonnie? That's when Jeremy suggested channeling all their magic into one person, which might allow them to make physical contact. So Kai cast the spell again, sending Jeremy back into the prison world. While they waited, Damon and Elena went to the bedroom and found the bottle of whiskey. They shared a drink with Bonnie, crossing time and space. As they were about to return to the living room, they discovered that the bedroom had been sealed with a magical barrier. Back in the prison world, Kai and Jeremy searched for the map that marked Silas's tomb. Maybe if they gave the map to Bonnie, she would be inspired. But at that moment, the map slipped through Jeremy's hand and fell to the ground. Jeremy looked up to see blood seeping from Kai's abdomen. It was Liv. She had attacked Kai, interrupting the spell. Jeremy rushed to stop her, but was flung aside by Liv's magic. Kai finally looked a little bit like a demon. Grinning wickedly, he used magic to severely injure Liv, then prepared to burn her alive. However, when Kai raised the candle to summon the flames, he hesitated. Luke's soul inside him wouldn't let him hurt Liv.
Why can't I kill her? Come on. Kai, do it. Do it. Come on! Kill her!
Liv seizes the opportunity to strike back, but at the last moment, Jeremy stabs her with a dinner knife and takes Kai with him. They took refuge in the kitchen, where Jeremy demanded that the gravely injured Kai cast the spell again. He had to stop Bonnie from killing herself. A now crazed Liv scoured the house, hunting for Jeremy and Kai. Damon, using his vampire hearing, located Liv's position. As he passed by the fireplace, Damon tore open a hole above it and tossed the remaining half bottle of whiskey inside. The explosion left Liv barely alive, and the barrier around the bedroom finally disappeared. In the prison world, Bonnie didn't notice the marked map. Still under the influence of alcohol, she headed to the garage, intending to inhale car exhaust and suffocate herself. Due to Kai's injury, Jeremy returned to his ghostly state. He could do nothing but watch as Bonnie recorded her final words, including what she wanted to say to him.
Jeremy, I hope you're living your life with no regrets. I hope you fight for the life you want.
As Bonnie spoke to Jeremy, it triggered a realization in her. She couldn't die like this, not in such a pitiful way. But by then, Bonnie was already weakened from carbon monoxide poisoning, her limbs too feeble to move. Jeremy desperately tried to flip the switch to open the garage door, but couldn't touch anything. Just as Bonnie was on the brink of suffocating, something changed. Whether it was Kai strengthening his magic or the power of Jeremy's love, he finally managed to open the door. As fresh air rushed in, Bonnie regained her breath. She looked up and saw Jeremy bathed in sunlight, his figure towering like a hero. At the same time, Damon healed Kai with his blood, and Jeremy returned to the real world. Upon learning that Jeremy had saved Bonnie, Damon and Elena finally breathed a sigh of relief. Liv was brought back to the apartment by Tyler. It turned out that after Tyler's desperate pleas, Elena had used her blood to heal Liv. Tyler was deeply disappointed in Liv. She would rather risk death than live a good life with him. By saving Bonnie, Jeremy had also found redemption for himself. He had been living in a state of despair ever since Bonnie's departure. Now, inspired by Bonnie's survival, Jeremy decided to apply to art school and start a new chapter in his life. As for Stefan and Caroline, they had been missing all day, but it turned out they had gone on a treasure hunt. The teddy bear that Bonnie had lost in her childhood had actually been secretly buried by Caroline. Now Caroline dug it up and patiently sewed it back together. After her near-death experience, Bonnie finally noticed the map that had fallen. Inspired by the markings, she recalled the tombstone that contained magical blood. With new determination, she set off on her journey to find her way home.